And hello, we are live. Welcome to the live stream. I am streaming now at 1 in the afternoon, which is not when I usually do my streaming. I usually do my streaming in the evening after my son goes to bed, and I stay up for a few hours doing some stuff. But I have the day off work today. I took the day off work. I had some vacation days stored up, and after my long business trip last month, yes, all of last month pretty much, I thought, well, I'll take a couple of days off. And since I have this massive backlog of video, look, I did 10 of them last time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and there's still 15 left to go, as near as I can tell. I thought, well, I'll do another live stream. Everybody loves live streams, right? And this time I'm doing it at 1 in the afternoon, my time, and I hope that some of you folks, well, some of you folks are watching from work, in which case, shame on you, or whatever, who cares? And so I hope that some of you folks who are over maybe in Europe, where it's, I don't know, what is it? What day is it over there? No, it's like probably 6 in the evening or something, more or less. Yeah, 6 p.m. Thank you. And then hopefully some of you guys can tune in. I apologize to you guys. I don't. I'm sure you don't feel that I owe you an apology, but I apologize to you guys. I know that there's this tendency for some people on the internet to just assume that everyone on the whole internet is in the United States and to not consider folks who are overseas. And I try not to do that. But at the end of the day, I can only stream when I can. Yes, yes. You especially should feel ignored, Nick Love SK. I am specifically ignoring you, actually. Nick Love SK is a big fan of my cat and a popular commenter on my channel. So we're going to do some Blackbox Log Analysis. We're going to do some chatting and normal BS, just like always. There were some questions that came up in the chat before the stream started. Let me go back and take a look because some of them looked interesting to me. Let's see. There's no gin. I have no drink today, actually. There's no gin in the drink because I have no drink. Had a cup of coffee before I did the stream, though. I recently switched from drip coffee back to French press coffee. I do this every couple years, and I switched to French press, and I'm like, oh, this is so good. It's so rich and chocolatey and such a full flavor. Wow, why did I ever stop drinking this? And then after a while, my French press breaks or whatever, and I switched to drip. And then I'm like, oh, this is such a clean flavor. Why did I ever switch? And every 6 months or a year or 2 years, I switch. And so now I'm back on French press. And there you go. There's a little information about coffee. I'm sure you're all interested in that. That copter in the photo, this photo, that copter in the photo is my Strider. And that was my first mini quad. RedRotor Strider, that's, you know me and RedRotor now because I use the RedRotor RROSD in most of my builds, but I actually met RedRotor as a company by buying this Strider frame, which was my first mini quad frame. And I don't have that copter anymore, but it treated me very well for a long time, and I'm still a big fan of RedRotor as a company as a result. So there you go. Yeah, it was pretty beat up. I build my copters to fly good and to be durable. I don't understand, and I assume this is a defect in my personality. I don't understand people who build a copter and they put the colorful wire loom on it and they enamel the edges of the carbon fiber and they take these beautiful showroom photos of it. I'm like, the first time you fly that, it's going to be covered in dirt and dust and grass. The wire loom's going to get nicked up, and you're just going to spend more time keeping it looking nice than you do flying it. And I'm like, well, I'll just fly it. That's my philosophy. Do you think it's worth flashing Betaflight or Cleanflight onto a CC3D board? Well, sure. I think that Betaflight is a fantastic firmware. It flies very well, and if you look at my recent video that I released last night, I had a surprise video I released last night, which was this one, Practical PID Tuning Part 6, which is the... No, that's my cat. That's the tuning process for the Quadrysteria Rush 4-inch. And I'm just going to keep doing these, by the way. This practical PID tuning series started, and I had the idea that it was going to be a sort of self-contained tuning series. But then I was like, well, I'm just going to keep tuning copters. I may as well keep documenting it. So I'm just going to keep doing this as I tune more and more copters. And if at some point you think the playlist has gotten too long, just stop watching it and you'll be fine. Uh, but if you look at this one, the default, the 2.9 defaults are flying really good. I make the joke that people ask, does Betaflight have auto-tune? And I say yes, just install Betaflight and the default PIDs are tuned. You're done, auto-tuned. But so I do think that there's a motivation to put Betaflight on whatever your flight controller might be, because I think it flies really well, even at defaults. CC3D has its own little quirks because it was originally designed to run OpenPilot and now LibrePilot. And so it's got the OpenPilot bootloader, which takes up memory. And so there's custom hexes. And then there's all kinds of other quirks, like if you want to run a buzzer, it doesn't have a buzzer port, so you have to have buzzer on a motor header. And it seems like there's all these, there's the flex port and the main port. And I'm sure if you know CC3D, this is all rote to you. But it seems to me like I see a lot of people having weird questions and weird problems with CC3D. So I wouldn't buy a CC3D today if I was buying a flight controller from scratch, especially if you weren't already, if you were going to run OpenPilot or LibrePilot, yeah, go for it. But if you want to run Betaflight, but I wouldn't buy one for it. But if you already have one, and especially if you already know the ins and outs, absolutely run Betaflight on it. Sure, why not? D-term spikes around hover throttle on an X-Racer F303. We have to see the Blackbox log to know more, but to see what kind of spikes they are. So it's a little hard to say. Are legit red bottoms fairly durable? I don't know for sure, but people seem to say they're pretty durable. So this one person says below that they have a tendency to throw magnets. Again, I don't really know much about that. Packet error in the Betaflight configurator. Now, I assume you're talking about, I'm not even going to be able to show it to you. Oh, yeah, down here at the bottom where it says packet error. That, I guess, is a serial port error. Maybe you have a bad USB cable. I don't actually 100% know what that means. So try changing your USB cable, maybe. This Neklovek SK. That's I'll get it right. Neklovek SK says that the RS2205 motors are great motors, but they have very, very imbalanced nuts on them, prop nuts. So get some good prop nuts, and you'll be fine. How do you tell what's a good prop nut, though? Do I go down to the hardware store and just buy one? How do you know if they're balanced? If anybody has any tips on that, definitely say the word. Okay, can't wait for this full KISS live stream. Yes, I'll be talking only about KISS. I released a video last night about KISS, and some people liked it, and some people objected to it. I'm not sure how much I want to say about that right this minute. But what I'll say about that is this: there's some part of me that wants to say, I didn't end up diving as deep into this product as you might have liked, and that's my prerogative, and that's true. But also, I understand that I do have some responsibility to my viewers, because I definitely benefit from the fact that you guys want to watch me, and so it can't be like somebody who, like some celebrities who get famous. I'm not saying that I'm famous, but some celebrities get famous and then they kind of get arrogant and they forget who got them where they are, right? Which is that people like them and want to watch them. And people like me and want to see me talk about these technical topics, so it makes sense that if you like KISS, you would be disappointed that I didn't get as into it as you are, and you would like to see me get into it. And I respect that. I definitely haven't written KISS off entirely. I just feel like it was not a good fit for where I was at that time, which is I'm trying to retrofit the KISS ESC into another build. It's already built, and I just have to swap the flight controller. So it's already sort of set up a certain way, and I'm trying to sort of jam a KISS ESC in. And I don't think that's a good idea. I think if I was going to do it again, I would start from scratch and I would want to have KISS ESCs as well. And I think the system is sort of designed to integrate as a whole, as opposed to be sort of plugged into something that's already set up another way. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Anyway, the other thing is that I probably shouldn't record sort of semi-ranty responses at 1 in the morning and post them to my channel without sleeping on it first. Whatever. Little Bees. Little Bees are good. Little Bees used to be one of the best BL Heli ESCs because they had the dedicated gate driver, and that was one of the only things where they were in fact, I think for a while they were the only BL Heli ESC that had a dedicated gate driver. So for a while they were a contender against KISS on the BL Heli side, although they still didn't match KISS performance. The other big thing that KISS has that BL Heli didn't have is a hardware PWM generator, which now BL Heli S has that as well. Little B, I wouldn't buy Little B ESCs today. Number one, regular Little Bs are an F330 chip, which is just completely outdated. Don't buy anything less than an F390, like an XM20 or a Little B Pro or an RG20 Plus. Those are all examples of F390 chips. But even still, the Little B design, it has doesn't have enough capacitance, and it puts a lot of noise into your system, which can do things like fry your camera or fry your video transmitter or make lines in your video. So I just wouldn't pick a Little B today. It's not, I think, the best choice. Yeah, no pink soda today, no drink today. I'll probably wish I had a drink about an hour and a half in, though. Let's see. Beep at 0 throttle is normal. I don't know what that means. TBS Calibri. I don't know a lot about the TBS Calibri. It just hasn't come across my radar. It's an F3 flight controller. It's probably fine. The only thing that differentiates flight controllers, let's talk about that for a second. Which flight controller flies the best? Well, it turns out that it doesn't really matter because all of the F3 flight controllers, they're running the same. Let's say you've got an F3 flight controller and you're running Betaflight 291. They'll all fly the same, except for the fact that some of them will have an I2C gyro. And by the way, I know that some people think I should be saying I squared C, but I'm not going to do that. Some of them will have an I2C gyro, and some of them will have an SPI gyro. The ones with the I2C gyro can only run at 4 kilohertz. The ones with the SPI gyro can run at 8 kilohertz, and 8 kilohertz has a higher Nyquist limit and less aliasing than 4 kilohertz. So you could debate whether there's any practical flight effect, but it is like in terms of increasing the Nyquist limit, that's just always a good thing, even if the difference is marginal. So the type of gyro that the board has on board definitely matters in terms of flight performance. But as long as it's an F3 chip and it's running the same Betaflight or Cleanflight or whatever you have, it's going to fly the same. And so the real differentiating factor for these boards, in my opinion, other than the gyro, is how the board is laid out and what features it brings to the table. So, for example, does it have a soft serial port? Does it have a Spectrum satellite port? Does it have an onboard voltage regulator, or do you have to have a voltage regulator on your PDB? So I think when I look at boards, I think about what gyro chip it has on board, and then I think about all those other features. But I've seen posts like on Reddit, for example, where somebody's like, just got this flight controller. Oh, my copter has never flown so good. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you like your flight controller, but ultimately it's not flying so good because of the flight controller unless you're coming from a KK 2.0, in which case, yeah, there's a difference. But any of these F3 boards will fly just as good as any of the others unless there's something defective about them. And that's where we get into the issue of the 6500 gyro, right? So some of the boards with the 6500 and the 9250, like the Lumenier Lux and the SP Racing series, some of those have issues with gyro noise. They need to be soft mounted, or in some cases they can't even be solved with soft mounting. And there's some question as to whether that's an effect of the noise in the copter, or maybe some people have, RS2K has speculated or hypothesized even that it has to do with the 3.3 volt regulator being noisy. Well, I don't think there's a definitive answer there, but the ones with anyone that's having gyro glitches is of course going to fly badly. The H32 Rev 6 is another one that has gyro glitches, although I think that's a separate issue. What about virtual COM port? VCP, I'm torn on VCP. So there's two ways to do the USB port on these flight controllers. One is to do a thing called virtual COM port, or VCP. VCP means that the microprocessor itself is handling the COM port functions. There is no actual serial adapter, if you will. It just does it. It's like, we got this microprocessor, let's let it do the work. and that's virtual COM port. The other way to do it is to have a thing called a CP210 chip on board. It's a physical chip that's on the board, and it takes the ones and zeros from the microprocessor in one side, and it spits out USB on the other side. Something has to present the USB interface to the computer. You can either have the processor do it, and that's VCP, or you can have the CP210 chip, in which case the processor just thinks it's talking out a serial link, and the CP210 chip translates serial to USB, and vice versa. The advantage of the virtual COM port is that you don't take up a hardware UART. You know how on many of the boards, especially the older ones, UART1 is used for USB, and you can't use UART1 for anything else, or it conflicts with your MSP protocol. So with VCP, you have your COM port. You don't have to take up a hardware UART, which means if your board has 3 UARTs, you can use all of them for whatever you like. But the thing is, at least on Windows, and I am, as Chickadee Tech asks, I'm running Windows. Oh, you're asking Joan. On Windows, the VCP drivers can be really fiddly. For example, every time the board reboots, so you go to the CLI, you make a configuration change, you click Save, the board reboots. You have to, on some of my boards, I have to manually disconnect, reconnect every freaking time. It doesn't detect that the board has disconnected. That is absolutely 100% a Windows driver issue, so I'm told by people who run Linux and Mac OS, but I'm on Windows, so what can I say? But it's nice having those 3 UARTs and not spending a UART on your USB port. On the other hand, it's nice when the freaking board automatically disconnects and reconnects when it reboots. So I don't have a definitive answer there. Favorite flight controller and PDB setup. My favorite is the RedRotor RROSD, and this will not surprise anyone who's watched my channel for any amount of time. My favorite PDB is the RedRotor RROSD, which I like to say it's a $35 PDB, but you get a free OSD to go with it. Ha ha ha. It's an OSD and PDB in one, and I like the X-Racer F303v3.1. Oh, hey, v3.1 is out, by the way. 3.1 is the same as 3.0, but it fixes the TX and RX on UART2 problem, so that's fixed. That didn't take long. Those are my favorites. What is S-Bus and what does it do? S-Bus is a digital protocol for communicating RC channels information. So instead of a PWM signal, you have a digital serial signal. What it does is it reduces latency. That's the gist of it. You have I think it's like an 11 millisecond or maybe a 9 millisecond frame size, which means, whereas on CPPM, for example, you have an 18 or a 27 millisecond frame size. So it reduces the latency, and it feels, if you go from PPM or PWM to S-Bus, S-Bus feels a lot, the stick feel is much different, and once you go, you won't want to fly any other way. So, don't know about Emacs Lightning. If you have questions about ESCs, you should ask Quad McFly, Brian Harrell, and his website is miniquadtestbench.com. He is the master. He knows more about ESCs than anybody I know. He tests a bunch of them, and I just don't even bother trying. I just ask him. That's the answer. Okay, I suck. Come on, Juan. Are you talking to me? I knew it was going to be controversial. Talk bad about KISS. People come out of the woodwork. All right, let's do a Blackbox Log Analysis. Lumpydonut, I am going to skip you, and I'll tell you why I'm going to skip you. Number one, I'm going to skip you because you solved your issue. See, that's why I wait 2 or 3 weeks before I get to these. If I wait long enough, you solve the issue, and I don't have to. All right, good. The other reason so you're still having issues, but less now, but changing the timing seemed to help, and then you went to BL Help 14.6, and now it's just not even working at all. I don't know, sorry. I bet you've solved this problem too, but here's the thing. You got this freak out. Let's see. The other thing, oh, I know. Here's the other thing. Here's the problem. You gave me a video. It looks like you gave me a video with pre-rendered Blackbox, and that's no good to me. I need the actual Blackbox log. So if you're still having this problem and you want to submit another post, don't just edit this one, but submit another post, put the Blackbox log in the post and the video. Link me to the video without the pre-rendered overlay, and give me the actual Blackbox log so I can look at the data, okay? That's what I need, and that is in post 1. If you're going to submit, go read the first post of the thread, which has guidelines for what to submit, okay? All right, so I'm gonna. I want you to know, Lumpydonut, I didn't just forget you. Based on what you've submitted, I can't do your analysis. So I'm skipping this one, and I'm gonna go to the next one. Here we've got a one from staryk, DYS 1306 motor. Ooh, just a little one. Let's see, 118 carbon frame. Let's take a look at this frame. Oh, look at that cute little thing. Isn't that adorable? All right, great. Bind and fly FPV quadcopter. Interesting. I'm getting really interested in little 3-inch, like indoor copters, indoor safe copters. You know, just for other things to do. Like when I'm on a business trip, I could take it and fly it in the hotel or something. So I'm definitely paying attention to these. This is a really interesting little product. Yeah, the Joan, the HubOSD, I ordered one of those yesterday evening. I ordered one of those, and I was actually a little bit inspired by our interaction about the KISS, because I thought to myself, am I being too entrenched in my little ecosystem? Do I have some obligation as a YouTube reviewer to branch out more? And then I thought, you know, the HubOSD is interesting. I should look at it. So I ordered one. It's going to come in the mail, and I'm gonna put it in a build and see how that goes. Because, you know, if the only thing I ever talk about is RedRotor RROSD, then where have I ended up, right? Okay, so yeah, one of those is coming. It's very interesting. Let's look at it. Matek HubOSD. Well, look, even GetFPV sells it. Is that for real? GetFPV sells it? Oh, isn't that something? So here it is. It's very similar to the RROSD in theory, on paper anyway. 12 volt, 5 volt regulator, ESC pads. It's got the ESC pads at the corners like people really want. So everybody's going to be happy about that. It runs something called STOSD. I don't know anything about it. I'm going to take a look at it, and I'll definitely have a video up about it once I get it into a build and try it out. Getting back to this. Here we've got some crashes. Strange copter falls and crashes. Let's have a look. Now we've got a video here. So let's start by taking a look at the video real quick. I'll make sure my volume is okay here. I think it should be okay. Oh, we don't have any audio anyway. Wow, is this that little 3-inch copter? That is flying really nice for that's something. 3 inches come a long way. It's pretty fast. I mean, it's not like fast, but it's not bad for a 3-inch. That's what she said. I think we have a video freeze here. Hold on. I don't know what just happened here. I just lost the video. There we go. So it flipped over backwards. I thought at first that was an aerobatic move, but I think now that you didn't do it on purpose. It flips over backwards and crashes. Let's take a look at your log and see if there's anything we can figure out from your log. Yeah, Bud's FPV looks better than the ROSD. Sorry, JB. Hey, I'm not wedded to anything. It does have a lot of features that the ROSD lacks. Like, for example, the physical board layout. People really like the pads at the corner. I'll tell you that when I showed that to Tony, and I said, "Hey, Tony, what do you think of this?" So you got some Tony is the guy at RedRotor I talked to. I said, "Hey, Tony, what do you think of this? Looks like you got some competition here, buddy." And he said, "Yeah, it just motivates me to get the ROSD V2 designed." So I don't know if I was supposed to tell you that. And by the way, who knows, what the timing is. That's just a comment, thrown off comment. But I do want you guys to know that, competition is good, right? So a lot of people hate on the Chinese, and they're like, the Chinese suck, they just copy things. And it's just absolutely, it is true that they just copy things. But also, they like to say the Chinese just do this one thing. They do a lot of things, okay? One of the things they do is they innovate and develop new products of their own. The Matek HubOSD is not a direct ripoff of any specific product, and it's one of the only other products out there that really does exactly what the ROSD does. And so if the existence of that product lights a fire under RedRotor and has them address some of these issues that people have been complaining about, like the location of the ESC pads, which people really seem to dislike, for example, great. That's great. The thing is, one of the things I like about the RROSD is, like before I got into the RROSD, it was I was using minimum OSDs and they were constantly dying on me, right? Even the Strider, which had a OSD built into the PDB, it cracked and broke after a few months of crashing. Well, my RROSDs have been absolutely rock solid. So if this product doesn't turn out to be absolutely rock solid, I'll consider it worth the price to spend $35 on an RROSD compared to this. So we'll see. Once we get in the air, we'll find out. Let's open this one up. Alrighty. And let's find our crash. We only have one trace here, so. Okay. So, yeah, you're just flying, you're raising the throttle, and then motor number 3 goes to max, and the copter flips over because, of course, so motor number 3 has stopped making thrust. That's the thing that happened. Whenever you see a motor go to maximum in Cleanflight, see how motor number 3 goes to maximum, and the other motors go down? The copter is trying to get more authority out of the system and is failing. So this motor is not really at maximum, because the copter is actually flipping backwards, and this motor is pulling forwards. Okay, so when you see a motor go to max and the copter is moving against the motor's direction, it means the motor has stopped making thrust. It's like if you push the brakes on your car and your car doesn't stop, what are you going to do? You're going to push the brakes harder. And while you plow into the wall, you're going to be standing on the freaking brake. If you only looked at the brake pedal, you would go, this car stopped. But look, the person's standing on the brake. The car must have stopped. But actually, the person was standing on the brake because the car wasn't stopping. And that's what we're seeing here. This motor goes to max. The flight controller is saying, give me more thrust. And it's not getting it. So we have a motor failure here. And then we have to do our basic troubleshooting to figure out why the motor failed. And that's a topic for a whole nother series. I have a video on that on my channel, for example. It just went live a few days ago. It is this video. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Troubleshooting quadcopter desync. You can certainly look into that. It's a tricky thing to troubleshoot, though, because so many different things could be causing a motor to fail. It's sort of open-ended, and we can't really... It could be desync, it could be a bad motor, it could be a bad soldering job on your part, it could be so many things. It's a little tricky to figure out. Okay, so that's what we're gonna call that one, failing motor. And there you go. That was 1971. Let's take a look at 1972. What do we got in the chat? Hold on. What's the best cheap setup for a beginner? That's a tough one. The tough question there is, do you want to build? And it's hard because if you're a beginner, you have no building experience. So if you buy a kit, like for example, the Mini Quad Bros kit, are they still around? I have no idea if they're even still around. I assume they're still around. If you buy a kit like this Mini Quad Bros kit, which is a nice starter kit, hold on. Hello, products, all products, Mini Quad kits. Here we go. And I have no affiliation with them, but when I was getting started in the hobby, I hadn't bought my first Mini Quad yet, and I considered buying one of their kits. So, you know, from $159 freaking dollars, you can get a kit for FPV racing, and you could build that kit, right? But if you don't have any experience building, it's going to be an exercise in frustration, because you're not going to know how to solder, you're not going to know how to do all these things. So then you say, okay, I'm going to buy a ready to fly. Well, the problem then is that when it breaks, you don't know how to fix it. So it's a little bit of a tough decision to make. If you buy a kit and you learn how to build it, it's going to be frustrating, but by the time you get in the air, you'll actually know how to keep it running. On the other hand, a lot of people are going to get so frustrated they're going to throw it all in the trash or out the window before they ever get in the air, at which point you should have just bought an RTF. So it's a tough call there. The best thing to do is to have a friend, find someone local. Our people in the RC hobby are so welcoming and so helpful about helping other people get into the hobby. because we know it's a tough hobby to get into. And so the best thing to do is to find a local flight club, find someone who knows how to build, and I don't know, befriend them, offer them a pizza or a beer or whatever it takes, get them to let you come over to their house and build with you for an afternoon, and in 3 or 4 hours they'll have your copter from parts on the bench to maidened, and you'll have learned so much in the process, and that's really the best way to do it, in my opinion. And that's the flight test mantra, by the way, and one of the reasons flight test is so cool. Let's see. I missed your question, NWJT. Sorry I missed your question. It's hard to do the chat and the talking at the same time, but I'll try to pay attention. Do I explain how to set up Blackbox on my channel? Absolutely. In fact, I do. And you guys are always welcome to ask me questions about, hey, do you have this video? Because one of the things, I have it all in my head, and you can't always find the right search terms. But, see, I haven't even found it. It's open log. See, I couldn't even find it with my first search. Never mind you. Here we go. No. I know it's here. But I should at least try searching my channel, because, here we go, got it. How to configure Blackbox on Cleanflight and Betaflight. Yes, I have that. I'm going to paste it into the chat box right now. Could I expand my chat window a little more? No, I can't. YouTube has set the size of the chat window. You mean, can I make it bigger so you can read it? No. No, I'm going to leave it because I kind of like my screen layout. I'm going to leave it. Okay. Let's see. What else have we got? Let me go through here. Video we show build tips to get better FPV footage. I'm not sure what that is. You mean like dealing with camera vibration and whatnot? Interesting. Loud motor bearing can cause jitters at 0 throttle while descending. If you have jitters at 0 throttle while descending, it's probably prop wash, and you should consider all the things you do to troubleshoot prop wash, which are hardly guaranteed. I have a video on prop wash, how to tame prop wash oscillation. Here's the thing, though. The name of the video, I'm going to paste the link into the chat. The video is a little misleading in the title because there's no one answer to how to tame prop wash. There's just 17 different things you try, and maybe one of them works and maybe it doesn't. So it's a really tricky problem to solve. That's a good lead into this. Look what I have on my copter. What are these? How many? Wait, that's not a KingKong 5040. That's a tri-blade. And I'll tell you what happened. Flying the Rush, it was such a good flying copter, and I thought to myself, how much of this is because it's a well-designed frame with good motors, etc., etc., and how much of it is because it's tri-blades? I thought I should give tri-blades. The other thing is, I flew the QuadQuestions QQ190 at 60 degrees up tilt, at wide open throttle, literally full throttle, and it didn't feel that fast. And I thought maybe my two-blade 5040 props are not really delivering the performance that I want from them. You remember I picked those props because they were cheap and because they tuned well. They are the smoothest props I've ever flown with no prop wash. It's beautiful. But they're not very fast. And so I do have some KingKong tri-blades on the way. They're coming from China right now. I can't wait till they get here. So I put these tri-blades on. These are the DYS 5040 tri-blades. DYS. I like these props because, unlike the DALs, these are pretty flexy. The DALs, they'll bend in a crash at the base, and then they're so off balance you cannot fly them. Whereas these ones are flexy enough that if you crash, they kind of just bend right back, and they're light enough they don't unbalance your props too much. You can keep flying on them. I feel like the DYS unbreakable is a little bit misleading because, yes, they don't break, but no, you can't crash on them more than once and get back in the air. Well, I mean, you can, but I mean, you may as well just break them. At least then you know they're destroyed, right? So I've been tuning these tri-blades, and here's where I'm going with this. They're flying great, but they got prop wash, and I cannot get rid of it. And I know some of you are going to be very disappointed because you think I'm the king of tuning, and I certainly play that reputation up. It certainly benefits me, and I'm so embarrassed to I'm like, I can't put this video up on the internet. Someone will say, oh, there's prop wash. But I'm still going to put the video up. But what I'm getting at here is that if you're having prop wash, it may be that you need different props. It may be that you need different ESCs. Who knows? It could be so many different things, and it is not a guarantee on any given setup that you're going to be able to get rid of prop wash entirely. It's not a guarantee. It may just not be possible. Slow but violent or large oscillations. Yeah, that's tough. I don't know. Here's another thing to talk about. I do not balance my props. I will never balance a 5-inch prop. If a 5-inch prop is not balanced from the factory enough that I can fly it, I will just throw it away and use a different brand of props. There's too many good props out there to waste time balancing mediocre props. That's my opinion. I don't know the answer to that about slower, violent, or large oscillations. It's interesting. I was thinking about I guess we're going to do a lot of talking on this one and not as much black box, but we'll get to some black box too. But whatever, we'll do whatever is interesting, and I hope you enjoy it. I was thinking that, and this is going to sound like I'm bragging, but I don't mean it that way. Every copter I build flies pretty much okay on stock PIDs, and I never have these strange problems that I can't explain, like slow and violent oscillations during fast flight or in the wind. I've just never had them. And that's not a coincidence. There's something I'm doing that makes it work. And I wonder, and again, I don't mean this in a bragging way, I'm just thinking about what makes a copter fly well versus what makes a copter fly badly. And I asked myself, why don't I have these problems? And perhaps it is pointing to that the component selection and the building process is just as critical a part of tuning as the PIDs. And there's something that I'm doing right by skill or by chance that is preventing these problems. A lot of times when people ask me a question like this, what causes slow but violent or large oscillations during fast flight or in wind, I think, I have never seen that. And I look at the black box and I can see that it's happening, but I have no idea why. And I think to myself, if I was holding your copter in my hands right now, I would look at it and go, oh, no, listen to this motor. Or, oh, yeah, your flight controller's loose. Or something, right? Or there's a bad solder joint here. But since I'm not there, I can't see the invisible thing that's been done wrong. There's too many things to ask for. And so anyway, the takeaway there is that it feels like there's the component selection and then the skill of the builder definitely plays into the ability to tune just as much as the selection of the PIDs. I've never flown a 450. Actually, that's not true. I had a flight test electro hub with 9-inch props. I don't know if that's in the 450 range. They're not as aerobatic, though. Smaller motor-to-motor distance makes a more nimble copter. So smaller props and smaller motor-to-motor distance is a more nimble copter, more responsive. DAL T5040v2. I tried the T5040v1 and it was horrible. Horrible. I put it on my copter. I had oscillations like crazy. It was out of balance or whatever, and I threw it away. I've heard that T5040v2 are better. I'm looking forward to it. I may try them someday. If these KingKong tri-blades are good, though, then I'm just going to stick with them. Because my philosophy is find what works and stick with it until it stops working. You got to have a little bit of an eye out there for stuff that's better than what you've got, you know? Like if you'd never flown gyrosync with Betaflight, you might not realize that regular Cleanflight with 2500 loop time was bad. But once you fly it, you go, oh shit, this is better. But at the same time, I don't feel like I have time and energy to be trying every last little thing because I'd rather just be flying. I have no opinion on those motors, the F60 Tiger motors. Tiger motors are in general very, very good. But yeah, yep, Electro Hub started there. Prop wash, yes, prop wash can absolutely have to do with the weight of the prop. Heavier props are less responsive. Prop wash happens very, very rapidly. So in order to compensate for prop wash, the motors have to be able to spin up and down very, very quickly. And when they can't, that's when you get prop wash oscillation. Heavier props have more trouble dealing with prop wash. They make the ESC work harder. And that's why my 2-blade 5040s, I can tune the prop wash. I can do anything I want with the throttle at any time and never get prop wash Maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration. But on the 5040s, I've got it tuned so I really never have prop wash. And I cannot get these tri-blades to that point. And some of that's because of balance. I need more D-gain, but I can't have it because the props are out of balance, and my motors get hot if I add more D-gain. But some of that is just because the tri-blade props are less responsive. Some of that is because these are 2600 kV motors, and the 2600 kV motors have less torque, and therefore can't spin the prop up and down as aggressively. Yes, this is tri-blades on my high kV 5-inch setup. I feel like a 5040 non-bullnose tri-blade is as heavy as I would go on a high kV motor, but I feel like it's an acceptable choice. Okay. TBS Tango looks, I've only seen marketing shots of it. It looks like an interesting radio. I'm not interested in a radio with a built-in screen for FPV. I know that a lot of people are and will really benefit from that. Also, the TBS, the audio link protocol that TBS has invented is super cool. That's super cool. They've done a really cool thing with that, and I assume the Tango integrates with that. But I don't personally have an interest in a transmitter that has a built-in FPV screen because I fly with goggles. I don't know what the next big thing is. And you know what, if I had to guess, the next big thing is modular integrated flight control systems like the Chickadee that I had a video on this morning. And by the way, the Chickadee is here in the live stream, so if anybody has questions or wants to talk about the Chickadee PolyStack, which my video came out this morning on, he can answer questions about that. He's right here. I see this started with TBS. And by the way, ever since I criticized the TBS cube, the cube, right, the ESC thing, I go out of my way to say positive things about TBS because I really do feel very positively about them. And I think I want to be very clear that I criticized one product that they have, and I don't have a grudge or an axe to grind. Where was I going with that? Oh, they started it, this whole integrated stack thing with the TBS whatever cube. I'm blanking on the name. But I think we're going to see more and more of that going forward. Integrated OSD, video transmitter, flight controller, PDB. Exactly how it's going to all shake out is sort of up in the air, but we're seeing that integration happen more and more. And the PolyStack is a good example of that. So I think we're going to see more of that in the future. Do not make a living at this. I make a small amount of money, roughly equivalent to what I kind of am at the point now with YouTube and Patreon. Thank you to all my patrons, by the way. Thank you to my patrons. So much thanks for what you do, which is give me $1 or $2 a month, and it adds up to a significant amount. And it's very nice with the patrons, by the way. Unlike the YouTube, which every week I'm checking my YouTube ad revenue and going, well, how am I doing this month? Just because I'm curious. But with the Patreon, it's really nice to know that there's just this chunk of money that's going to come in. And I don't have to worry about if I got ad views or what my CPM was. These people just say, look, don't sweat it. Here's a couple bucks. And it's nice. So if you're a patron of mine, thank you very much. And if you're not a patron of mine and you want to contribute to the channel, even something as little as $1 a month, you have no idea how little money I actually make from ad revenue from each subscriber. Now I have 10,000, 11,000 subscribers, so it does come to a decent chunk of money. But actually, if you might be thinking, oh well, Patreon, what? I can't give any money. If it's $1, it's still more money than I get by a factor of at least 10 from YouTube. So if you do want to contribute, $1 is not too little. Now I sound like NPR, right? But yeah. I got off on a tangent. Hold on. I gotta go back. New subscribers. I do not make a living. I make a little bit of money. I kind of cover the hobby. And I put all the money back into the hobby anyway, buying things for the channel. My goal at the end of the year is to owe the IRS no money at all and have like $1 in profit or maybe a negative number. I would like to make a living at it, but I also really like my day job. I really like my day job, and it pays pretty well, so I kind of just do both now. No, that's not a bad idea. Go for it. It might fly like crap, though, pure trick shots. I don't know anything about the F7s. As you say, though, Betaflight is not currently maxing out the F3s, so there's no real point in going faster until we have software that takes advantage of it. Okay. Check the review and check the website, Joan. And Chickadee is here in the chat if you have any specific questions. Okay. enough of that. Let's do another black box log analysis. Not that one. This one? Okay, here we go. Here's BorgAlpha with oscillations on problems with flips and rolls. It's a Martian 2 5-inch. That's the Banggood alien clone. It's a damn close clone, although some would argue that the quality isn't there. RS2205 2300 kV motors, RG20 plus ESC, Rotor Geeks, SP Racing F3. Okay, fine. Let's take a look at the files. Yeah, and again, I'll take one more second while this is loading to plug my Patreon. Here's my Patreon. It's the Drone Racing Engineer, and I will post it in the chat. And I don't want people to think I'm in this for the money, because I just love doing this. But if there's an opportunity to make some money that could then help me be able to put more time into the channel, or like buy things for the channel. Like, for example, I really wish I had a radar gun so I could do speed tests, but I don't have a radar gun because one of the cheap radar guns are really crappy and don't work well. So, for example, that's something where if the Patreon was higher or if the YouTube revenue was higher, I wouldn't have to like waffle over it. I could just go, yeah, all right, I'm going to spend $300 on a radar gun. That's the kind of thing. So yeah, as the number goes up, the channel gets more elaborate, and I also get to buy more expensive champagne. I don't know. No. It's the Drone Racing Engineer, if anybody wants to support. And just even $1 or $2 is incredibly useful because it just adds up. I have 10,000 subscribers. If each of them subbed $1 a month to my Patreon, I could quit my job. That would be $120,000 a year before taxes. That's a lot of money. So that's not going to happen. But if you're sitting there going, it's just $1. No, that would add up to a lot if everybody did it. Anyway, enough about that. Don't want to go on about that. And go on about that for 52 more seconds while this RAR file opens. What camera is that? What camera is that? Well, I don't know. What camera is it? Hold on. That's the Xiaomi Yi. That's the camera I fly. Check this out while that RAR file is loading. Look at this Yi mount. Now, hang on. This is the Yi mount I have been using. It's the 3D printed sort of couch, right? You're familiar with that, I'm sure. This is the Quadrysteria Yi mount. They also have one for a GoPro and for a Session. Look how it mounts with these legs here in the back and the front. This is really slick because you can set the angle, right, by changing the screw holes. They have adjustable, you can't really see it. You can adjust the screw holes and change the angle. And it's got a little bit of wobble to it, so it's shock absorbing. It doesn't show anything in flight, and it's really super easy to mount. It's very cool. That's from Quadrysteria, and it's a great design. I'm really impressed with it. Okay, now the file's downloaded. What is my day job? I work with RF, so I mostly design Wi-Fi networks, design, troubleshoot, and manage the installation of, although I don't actually, put APs on ceilings, Wi-Fi networks. I also do non-Wi-Fi RF, like 60 gigahertz point-to-point links and other stuff, but mostly it's Wi-Fi these days, because that's just what everybody's doing. So this is the perfect hobby for me. Let's see, 13.71. Thank you for putting the timestamp in. That's very helpful. And yeah, the Xiaomi Yi is like $80, and if you use the Waffle FPV, waffle like the food, FPV SuperView script, Google it. I feel like the quality is it as good as GoPro? Probably not, but it's like $80 instead of $400. So when you break one, you won't cry. So yeah, I feel like the Xiaomi Yi is a real rock star in this area. Oscillations and problems with flips and rolls. Okay, let's do it. So do we have audio?
Black box in this one.
No, I see. It's the sync is not right.
Black box.
Oh no, I see the problem. 13.71. Sorry, I put it in the wrong place. There we go. So we've already got some oscillations, even just taking off. Now hang on, let's watch that again. Now these first oscillations here, just as you get off the ground, you could certainly argue they're ground effect. Ground effect is when you're approximately 1 prop length or less off the ground. The wash from the prop, the air from the prop, which is coming down, hits the ground and gets disturbed, and then the copter can kind of bobble and shake. And that's why when you're coming in nice and smooth for a landing, and then all of a sudden as you get close to the ground, the copter starts going blah 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 blah. That's called ground effect, or not prop wash. It's ground effect. And you can get it when you take off if you don't take off aggressively enough. And that's why when you take off, it's a good idea. I mean, you could do a race start if you're a real rock star, but even if you're a beginner, you should kind of get through that hover point. Don't just hold at the hover point and bobble on the ground, but get through the hover point and to flying a little bit aggressively. But this is not ground effect. If you just look at how those oscillations are happening, it feels like P-term oscillation. So I already think there's an issue with your tune. That's a P-term oscillation. Okay, so ground effect could be inducing P-term oscillation, but if your P gain wasn't already on the edge, then I think you wouldn't be seeing it. So let's keep going. See, P-term oscillation. This is what P-term oscillation looks like, and it's a little hard to... P-term oscillation is regular in frequency, and it just has a certain look that if you see it enough times, you'll start to recognize it, and it's what we're seeing here. Let's take another look at the P-term oscillation that's happening here. And we can see it happening even as you're just flying. So the fact P-term oscillation comes from excess P gain, and the fact that it's happening even when you're flying relatively smoothly with no stick inputs means that your P gain is really excessive, probably. You could have not enough D gain. If you take a copter that has a sort of a perfect tune with like P of 5 and D of 25, and you lower the D all the way to 0, the D term has sort of a damping effect. It's more than that, but it's okay to talk about it that way for now. It has sort of a damping effect where it reins in the P term a little bit. And so if you suddenly take away the D gain, you'll get oscillations. So you could have not enough D, but you have too much P for the amount of D you've got at the very least. Yeah, it's just constant. So let's look at your P here. That doesn't sound right. Do we see oscillations? It's not on the roll axis. I don't see strong oscillations on roll. Is it on pitch? Let's see. Well, it's tough. We're not seeing big, strong oscillations, but you're not doing very much. I think this is a case where the sort of visible and audible indications are going to be much more clear than looking at the black box log. If you were to show me these black box logs without any video, I could see that the gyro, do you see that the gyro is oscillating here and the P term is counter oscillating against it? I could see that that was happening, but I wouldn't have a real indicator, as clear an indicator of what was going on as with the video. Now it is interesting to me that when you turned and raised the throttle, we did not get an increase in the oscillations. Excess P gain is as you turn and raise the throttle, that's going to bring out excess P gain oscillations. So we may not have excess P gain after all. And this is the benefit of you seeing my thought process in real time. You know, it changes as we go forward. I'm not always exactly right off the bat. So right here, this, if there was excess P gain, I would really expect to see, whoa, the oscillations come out. But we don't see that. See, it stays perfectly smooth there. It may be a windy day, as Quad Bob suggests. Perhaps. Yeah. You really do feel that these oscillations are P-term related. The frequency of the oscillations... yeah, something's up. Let's keep... Where's the flip or roll? We said we have oscillations after a flip or a roll. Where is the flip or roll? Let's see. Let's watch the sticks here and see if we can find one. Hello? Oh, we're up in the air. Are we going to flip or a roll? I don't see any flips or rolls in this whole file. No. Am I confused? No, yeah, oscillations and problems with flips or rolls. So you're having these oscillations. A flip example is here. I see. Let's take a look. I apologize for the volume there. Sorry, RIP your ears. So what we see here is that at the end of the flip, the copter rolls to the side. Do you see that? Let's watch it. I can't really watch it in slow-mo, but watch it again. Right there. The copter rolls to the side. So that is telling us that the front right motor failed to make thrust. The copter was coming forward. The front motor spun up to stop the move, and the copter rolled to the right, indicating the front right motor did not make thrust. The most common cause of a destabilization at the end of flips and rolls is that your min throttle is too low. The min throttle is low, which means when the copter is flipping, the motor is idle because it's flipping forward, so the front motors are idle. At the end of the move, the motors need to suddenly go from idle whoop, all the way to max. And if min throttle is too low, when they idle, they actually just stop entirely. And then they can't come back quickly and spin up, and you get this scenario. So the first thing I would do in this scenario is raise min throttle. Min throttle needs to be at least 15, maybe even as much as 25, or possibly more depending on your ESC, 20 microseconds above the point where your motor first starts spinning. As far as those other oscillations you've got, that's a tougher one. Let's look at your PIDs. Dang it, I can't see your PIDs here. They must be in the... Yeah, I have to open it in a text editor like a caveman. Yeah, we're using Cleanflight 113. Let's look at the PIDs. Where are the PIDs? There they are. So you've got a P of 5 and a D of 6. Let's look at your gyros. Let's zoom all the way out. So you see how clean these gyros are? Do you see how thin these gyros are? Pencil thin lines. This is an over-filtered copter. Well, hang on. Let's make sure. Let's turn off the smoothing. Make sure it's not my viewer. No, see, they're still just as thin. This is an over-filtered copter. This copter has too much filtering, which is creating latency for the PID loop. Now, that may not be causing your problem, but it's certainly not helping it. I'll bet you that you're using gyro LPF. Oh, 188. It could be worse. You're using gyro LPF 188 and gyro soft LPF of 60. That's actually not a terrible setup. I still think you should filter less. It certainly will help your copter's flight performance. It probably won't solve this issue, but it will definitely help overall with your flight performance. You could certainly set gyro LPF to either 256 or off, whichever option is correct for Cleanflight 113. And you could also raise this gyrosoft LPF. 60 is still a pretty aggressive number. You could go perhaps as high as 100. And the gyros will dirty up a little, but it'll be okay. As long as there's not too much noise, you're okay. The PID loop will get more responsive. The other thing I see is that your D gain is only at 6. And given how noise-free your copter is, you certainly can stand to raise your D gain. Your P gains don't feel unusually high, and when you're doing like sharp turns with throttle punches, I didn't see oscillations come out. So I don't think your P gain is too high, as I did when I first saw the copter start. I wonder if the issue is just that maybe it's a windy day. For rapidly changing situations like wind, the D term is very, very important. The P term simply can't sort of anticipate a rapidly changing situation. That's the D term's job. So with a D gain of 6, let's look again. It's just not that active though, unfortunately, because you're not doing very aggressive flying. Let me see if I can scale this up a little bit. What happens if I do this? Zoom. No, don't do that. Dang it. Yeah, so the D term is just not very active, and it feels like you could use more D gain. Just in general, it seems like that your D gain is unnaturally low. If you had a really noisy copter, then I would say, oh, well, that's why your D gain is low, but you don't. So I would try less filtering and more D gain is where I would go with this. And there it's going to be the end of that. Let me take a look at the chat now and see what I missed while I was talking about that. Oh, thanks for pointing that out. I did miss that the timestamp reset. How well does the mount hold up in crashes? Well, I don't know. I haven't flown it very much yet, but this is TPA or TPU, so it's a pretty tough plastic. I have high hopes that it will hold up better because the couch style mount like this, now this is actually NinjaFlex, so it's actually super flexy. The actual, the ABS plastic mount like this, it breaks all the freaking time. It constantly breaks because it's hard plastic, and as soon as you crash on it wrong, it shatters, okay? So this NinjaFlex, this is a friend of mine designed this, and this is no good because it's squishy. You can't really see, I guess, but it's squishy, and the problem is that the screws compress right here, and the top plate isn't held securely against the bottom plate because this stuff is so squishy. So this is no good either. So I have high hopes for this because the TPU is a really rigid plastic. It's got some give, but it's still pretty solid. So you can really crank these screws down and hold the plate together securely. It feels like it's got a really good balance of just enough give to keep it from breaking in a crash while being tough enough to hold together. So I'm hopeful, but I don't have an answer yet because I haven't crash tested it yet. Is the FC Chickadee delicate and crash tested? Should be interesting. I don't know. In a sense, it could be more robust because it's all sort of connected together like that. Then again, it does have the screws. It has metal screws that hold the stack together, and those metal screws are going to translate stress from the bottom plate into the stack. That is a good question, and I think a big part of Chickadee's success will hinge on the robustness of the system. If they get into the field and they start breaking, for example, because the screws are translating stress into the stack, or just because something about it is unacceptably fragile, that's going to be a big problem. I'm sure that Chickadee has done flight testing, I hope, and has some comments on that. The nice thing about it is once it breaks, it should be easy to replace the part that's broken without any soldering or rewiring. Just pull the module out and stick it back in again. RC Flyer 85, yeah, the Power Cube, the big reason that I don't like well, that's too strong of a statement. I'm not going to start shit by saying that. A thing that I don't like about the Power Cube is its price. For me, personally, the value of the Power Cube is not commensurate with its price because the things that it brings to the table are not things that I look for, and therefore I don't feel like paying a premium for it. If you're still, Josh Morgan, if you're still flying a Mobius, do yourself a favor. The video quality on the 1080p cameras, 1080p 60 cameras, whether it's a Yi, which I personally think is great, or a Foxeer Legend, or a Runcam 2, the video quality is so much better. And especially the Yi with the Waffle FPV script, where you can up the bitrate to 35 megabits per second, makes a massive difference. The Mobius is shooting at, I think it's 18 megabits per second, if my memory's correct. And the thing is, 18 megabits per second is fine if you're not doing fast motion. But FPV quadcopters are nothing but fast motion. When I used to fly with my Mobius, the entire ground was nothing but macro blocking. And that's because of the low bit rate. So upping the bit rate as high as you can, 35 megas as high as most SD cards will go, makes a huge difference in video quality. XJT module should be the same as a Taranis, shouldn't it? It's the same radio. The Taranis just has an XJT module inside, and you put it in your JR. The main difference there is going to be that if you've got an XJT module in a JR bay in the back of your Turner G9X or something like that, the big difference is going to be that there is a CPPM frame translation between the radio and the module. If you have a Taranis, everything stays 100% digital right up to the point where it goes out the radio, and that keeps latency low. If you have a JR module bay, you're not going to get the full benefit of S-Bus because you're going to have a CPPM frame between the radio and the module, and then you're going to go S-Bus to the flight controller. So you'll still get a benefit, but it won't be as much of a benefit as if you had a Taranis. And the same thing is true for Spectrum. If you've got a Spectrum radio and a Spectrum receiver, a satellite receiver, your serial all the way through and latency is absolutely minimal. Whereas if you have a bind and fly, an orange module, for example, in your JR bay, you're not going to get quite the same flight performance as if you had a native Spectrum module or Spectrum radio. Let's see. Yeah, if the cost of the Chickadee PolyStack is around $100, that's a tough one. You know, because you got a flight controller, which you're going to buy anyway, and then you got this extra stuff, which wouldn't be $100 if you bought it separately. So you got, for example, an open log, which is $10. You've got your receiver, which you were going to buy anyway, but now you have to buy the receiver cradle, right? So there's this additional cost in there, and you got to decide if the clean build, and it really has a very clean build, and seems like it'd be easy to maintain, since if you want to change a part, you just pop it out and pop something else in, and you're good to go. You got to decide if that price is worth it for you. I assume here, Buds FPV, that you're talking about a camera. As for getting a camera insured, I suggest I use these guys. I made this video with an intentionally humorous title. Free HD cameras for life, ask me out. I use a Shurion Canopy. I have no affiliation with them, but they've been good. They've replaced my Yi camera like 4 times now, no questions asked. So I just keep paying them money, and they keep giving me new cameras, and it's like a casino where every time you go in with $5 and you come out with $100. Like, well, I guess I'm gonna keep going to that casino, right? Okay, so yeah. That's true. No, you're absolutely right, Chickadee. Thank you. That's a good point. I was speaking a little off the cuff there. No, a big advantage here is that having the SPI micro SD reader is going to be way better than an open log. You're 100% right. I didn't mean to misrepresent you there. All right, let's do another one. This is 1974. Let's do 1975. Mr. Murder, you got another one for me? Dang it, Mr. Murder. You're sending me more workload. No, it's no problem. You never have to apologize for sending me a log or asking me a question. People are sometimes a little apologetic, and I guess I appreciate you trying to be respectful of my time, but at the same time, that's what I'm here for, and if I don't want to answer, I'll just ignore you. No hard feelings. Mr. Murder, I have a feeling you already tune well enough that I'm not going to have a lot to add, though. So, we'll give it a go, but I may not have a lot to say to you. Let's download this file. Matek FPV, if they haven't responded in 3 weeks, you need to call them. I typically get a response to my claim, in the 3 or 4 times I've done it, I've typically gotten a response in a couple days. if you call them up and get customer service on the line. The only problem I had is when two of my claims were for Mobius, and then the third one or whatever was for a Yi, and they hadn't actually ever heard of the Yi camera, so I had to call them up and like tell them what the product was, and they had to like look it up. But yeah, 3 weeks is too long. Call them. That's what I would say. Okay. Long's USB to Josh. So you're just looking for tuning advice. 558 grams is perfectly respectable with a Yi on board, by the way. I think if you're under 500 grams with a battery and no high-def cam, you're doing pretty good. That's just my opinion. 5x4x4 is super aggressive props. That should be interesting. On 2300 kV motors, you're probably fine. Should you go unsynced at 3200? I don't think it'll hurt. It might help, but I'm not sure it'll help either. I don't think there's any downside though, as long as your ESC can take it. If you go on an XM20, no, I don't know about that. I don't know if I would feed an XM20 32K signal. I just don't know. I mean, maybe it's fine, but I kind of squint at that a little. Give it a try. If your copter starts dropping out of the air, don't fly over concrete. That's what I would say. Oh, here's the file. Let's just take a look at the log. So you mentioned that your roll gyro is thick, so let's take a look at that. We'll go to 0% smoothing, and we'll zoom all the way out. I don't think that's too thick. It's a little thick, but you can see that especially when you raise the throttle, it thins out. I don't think that's thick enough that I would, maybe a little thicker here. Now it's starting to get thick enough that maybe you have an issue. It's interesting that it's just on roll. I'm not sure how to interpret that. It's not the first time I've seen that, but I'm not sure how to interpret it. Why is it just on roll? That's interesting. So that makes you wonder if there's a tuning thing going on. So let's take a look at your roll gyro, your roll PIDs. So as I look at your roll PIDs, I do see there's a lot of back and forth on the P term. He said he's in 20-mile-an-hour winds, so certainly that's not helping. It's tough to judge when the P term is active enough versus when it's overactive. I think we should go ahead and I was hoping to get out of downloading the video just for the sake of convenience, but I think I'm going to go ahead and download it because I don't think we're going to get away with analyzing this without a little bit of audio and video feedback. Like, is this too much oscillation? Can you see and hear this in the camera, or is this just invisible? I can't tell without actually looking at the video. It does look like you're sort of constantly oscillating, and if you look at the difference between, look at these oscillations here. Do you see that these oscillations are, I call them kind of like rolling hills? They are not equal above the front, the top and the bottom of the axis. And they don't have sort of a pure sinusoidal shape. Okay? Now compare that to here. Do you see that here it is kind of equal between the top and the bottom of the axis and is a more pure sinusoidal shape as opposed to like here? This is what I would call an active P term that's doing its job. This is starting to get to the point where I would say it's overtuned, where we're getting these sinusoidal oscillations. Now that may just be propwash, and maybe that's a fine. But if this is happening all the time, I start to think you're on the edge of overtuned. Frankly, this may be too much as well. We could check the video to find out. Let's see if the video is downloaded yet. No, it's going to be another minute yet. Do I have a cool pilot name that I use? When I registered my Facebook page, I registered the Drone Racing Engineer. So sometimes and on my FPV cams, I put DRE as my pilot call sign. So I guess that's mine. What do you have for me, buds? What do you got? What Lumenier motors to use with 3S and 12 amp ESCs? With 3S, you certainly want 2300 kV at least. You don't want any less than that. Maybe even 25 or 2600 kV, but you won't go wrong with 2300. The thing is, you're going to outgrow 3S and 12 amp ESCs so fast. Don't even buy 12 amp ESCs, okay? Buy 20 amp ESCs. And don't buy the Lumenier Simon K ESCs with the 5 amp Beck in them. No, buy a good BL Heli ESC or a KISS ESC are also very good. If you'd like to spend $28 on an ESC, you will get an excellent ESC for the price. But again, I would get something like an XM20 or an Acon Bolt Light. By the way, I'm just filling time while this file downloads. It looks like it's down. This is the ESC that Quad McFly always recommends when I say what's the best ESC out. So far, he just keeps saying this one. It's $15. It's a BL Heli S ESC, 30 amp ESC. This is the great ESC for any 5-inch build. $15 is a pretty good price. That's a good one I would recommend, and you will never need more amps than that on a 5-inch build, I dare say. As for Lumenier motors, all Lumenier motors are very, very smooth, very good. They're pricey, but they're very good motors, so you won't go wrong. On 3S, you could consider going to a higher kV motor, but then when you go to 4S in a few months, which you will, then you'll have to be a little bit tough to pick a good prop. So I would say get something in the 2300 kV price range, a 2205, 2300 kV, and this ESC or something like it, a BL Heli ESC like an XM20 or this one in the $12 to $15 range, and you'll be good to go. You'll still be using those after you throw your 3S batteries away and get 4S batteries. That's what I say to that. Now, Renat, there's too many different tuning problems to really nail it down that way. What I would say is this. Check out my playlist, Practical PID Tuning, and just start watching it. And that, I think, is the best I can give you for sort of a primer on that sort of thing. Especially video 5 in that playlist. Video 5 in that playlist, I go through. Actually, it's kind of exactly what you're asking for, now that I think about it. There's video 5 in that playlist, but heck, watch the whole playlist, if you like. Yeah. Okay, so we've got the video downloaded now. The sync is 1.517. Thank you for giving me the sync. Makes my life a lot simpler. Thank you very much. Very convenient. 1.517. And you've warned me that the video is really loud, so let me make sure that the audio is turned down before I start playing. Damn good stop. I don't think we're quite synced. Hold on. No, we are. That was a damn good stop, Mr. Murder. Did you guys see that? That was sharp. Now, notice how you can see in the black box that there was a little bit of bounce back. So here the copter is spinning. The gyro is positive. As the gyro comes towards the 0 line, the copter is slowing down. As it reaches the 0 line, the copter has stopped, and as the gyro goes negative, the copter is now moving the other direction. So you can see here that there's a bounce at the end, right? A rebound and a little bit of ringing there. But if we watch it, you can't see it. It's tiny. That's a heck of a sharp tune. I wonder, that's a heck of a sharp tune. Now let's think as we watch this video, folks. Are we seeing and hearing the oscillation that we're seeing in the black box? Let's think about that. I can hear some buffeting, like the wind, and I can hear the motors kind of responding to it. The camera looks smooth. I see a little bit of vibration getting into the camera here. I'm not even sure that the stream has the bit rate or the frame rate to pick it up. Little bit of buffeting there. Do you see how his copter holds attitude when he chops and raises the throttle? Watch that again. Watch the nose of the copter and how it does not go up or down as he raises and chops the throttle. Ready? So here's the throttle is full. He's going to chop the throttle and then raise it again. And the nose will stay almost perfectly stable. Watch. Little dip, little rise. That's very good I-term tuning there. That little dip on the chop and little rise on the punch, that's normal, but it's still very good. We also got a little bit of oscillation on the P here because the copter was falling and you raised the throttle, and that's the hardest thing for the P term and the D term to deal with. This I would call prop wash oscillation. I wouldn't say it's anything to tune out. See, watch, it happens right as he raises the throttle after falling. So that's just prop wash. A little prop wash there. There's a little bobble at the end of that flip. I have to imagine that it was a stick movement and not, because the tune is so locked in that I doubt a slow bobble like that would be related to tuning. Let's watch the stick. Yeah, it was the stick. He pulled the stick. There's a little roughness here. It feels like the roughness that we're seeing is the wind. It just sort of seems, the buffeting of the copter sort of seems to correspond to the wind noises. So it feels like, again, the 20-mile-per-hour winds are what's making this tough. I wouldn't suggest any changes to this tune based on what I'm seeing until I saw it flying on a calm day. Don't change a thing. It looks perfect. There you go. A good drone for your mom, Nick. Is this a joke? Is this a lead into a joke? You can get a good drone for your mom from my bedroom, where she was last night, teaching her how to fly a drone. No, I don't know. I'm joking. I'm trying to think of a good starter. Starter with like a, you know, like a SEMA or something like that. A little indoor, what is it? The SEMA X5C. Is that a good one? I don't really know them all off the top of my head, but a little, no, that's a big one. No. What's you guys in the chat say? Not for your mom? Oh, I'm sorry, Nick. I'm not kidding. It's not for your mom. It's for you, but your mom is gonna buy it. I'm sorry. I apologize. I really do apologize. I'm making a rude joke here, but you guys are coming to me seriously. So what's a good starter? What's a good starter drone? The first drone I would suggest somebody buy who has no flight experience. Here's one way to go about it. You need to get one of these little toy ones. The CX10, is it? Maybe. That's a little too small. Not that one. Something. I mean, it's a good starter, fine, but that thing, I think that's a little too small. I would think you might have a little trouble learning to fly on that. There's no size reference. There's no, it's hard to tell which way is front, and it's just got no power at all. What's that? Hubsan. There you go. Let's look at it. Hubsan X4. That's the one I'm thinking of. Thank you. And you can even get it with FPV built in if you want. Yeah, something like the Hubsan X4 is a great starter. Let's look at what else is on the Hubsan X4 page. People also looked at. Nothing. What else? The X5C. X5C. The SEMA X5C. Is it really? It's 170 million. It looks bigger. It looks like almost phantom sized with like, the thing is, this has like real props, whereas the Hubsan has these little props. These things, if you crash this into your couch or your dog or your wall, it's not going to hurt anything. The props will pop off. You'll be good. This is what I think is a great starter copter for a beginner. It's only around 30 bucks. You will learn to fly. The flight skills will transfer over. It absolutely will. And if it flies away in the wind, or your dog eats it, or you crash it into a lake, you're only out 30 bucks. You're not going to cry. I think anybody who's going to start flying and who wants to make the best use of their money and their time should learn to fly on something like this, or learn to fly in a simulator like FPV Freerider, or there are other simulators that'll do a fine job teaching you the basics of flight. Once you got that nailed down, then you can start, build your first racing copter. But I think this is a great choice for learning to fly. It may not be the answer you want, because you probably want to start with something exciting. But it's like, just, don't buy your 16-year-old son a Mustang the first day he gets his license, right? For many reasons. And one of them is going to be that he's just going to crash it. So learn to fly on something that when you destroy it, you're not crying because you just bashed $500 into a lake, you know, and that would be the advice I give. Definitely, if you're going to go with a simulator, do not use one of these game pads. They're great for playing video games. They're terrible for flying a copter. The resolution on them is crap. It's no good for flying. So you definitely need to get a USB transmitter. Some transmitters are just for USB, but they're an RC transmitter with just USB, no RF radio in them. Some radios you can actually plug into your computer, like my Taranis has a USB port. It plugs into the computer. And here's something cool. Now this is a product, I don't even know if I'm supposed to show you this, but I'll show it to you. This is a product from a simulator company called AccuRC, and they're adding FPV and multi-rotor to their lineup, and it is an S-Bus adapter, so you can plug your X4R receiver into it, and then you can just use your radio into your computer. Isn't that cool? Okay, if I just violated an NDA, I apologize. Oops, I have to cut this out. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. All right, let's take a look at the next one. I think 1976 is the next one. So this is interesting. I haven't seen this video, and I'm not going to spend y'all's time watching 15 minutes of this video during the live stream, so I'm going to just take your description here. But you start with D and then P and I. That makes no sense, but okay. If it works, it works. So if you look at the black box and the D term seems concerning, one of the things you need to look at with the black box, with the D term, is hot motors. If your motors are warm, or hot. If your motors are hot, like if you can't hold your finger on them for 5 seconds because it gets painful, that's probably too hot. If you have an infrared thermometer where you can actually measure the temperature, certainly if you're getting into the range of 70 degrees Celsius, that's probably too hot. That is definitely too hot if you have regular N52 magnets like the red bottoms do. If you have an N40 whatever magnet, I don't remember the number, or if you have an N52SH magnet, the high temp magnets, they can be good for up to like 200. I'm not sure the actual 150. I think it's 150. But I'd say if your motors are coming down hotter than about 70 Celsius, that's too hot, and you're at risk of damaging them. If you have high temp magnets, maybe they could come down hotter, but it's still not good if your motors are coming down hot, because you're just wasting energy as heat. So that's how you tell if your D term is too high, if your motors are coming down hot or if you are hearing and seeing oscillations. Let's look at your log file. For 4-inch props, I think you're going to find 2300 kV to be underpowered. It just, whether that's okay with you depends on your expectations. If you're used to flying a 5-inch copter with some power and you go to 4-inch props with 2300 kV motors, I think you're going to be disappointed. The Quadrysteria Rush on 4-inch tri-blade bullnose props with 2500 kV motors does not feel slow. If you were to put it side to side with a 5-inch copter and do a drag race, the 5-inch would win. But it doesn't feel slow or underpowered when you're flying it. And if you go full throttle on a punch out, it goes up pretty fast. So I would say 2500 kV, 26 or even 2700 kV for 4-inch motors, not higher. So you can get some 2900 kV motors, but I'm not sure. I think you're getting into a little bit of a crazy realm there. But for 4-inch, I would shoot for around 2500 kV, definitely. Okay, I downloaded this. This is, hello, back away. What am I doing here? What's the name of the file? Flying around the house. There we go. Yeah, I have seen that baby tricopter. It does look awesome. I'm so glad David Windestall is out there making cool tricopters. I'm not personally a tricopter lover. Now, Joshua hates tricopters. Thank you. No, I just have never sort of fallen in love with tricopters the way he is. But I think it's great that he's out. He loves them, and he's out there making these cool products and doing what he loves. So that's pretty cool. This is roll we're looking at, and we're specifically looking at the D term. So I don't see anything like excess D-term noise. Nothing in here is even remotely troubling. Now, granted, we're not doing a lot. The trace is pretty idle. There's not a lot going on. But the D-term is and the P-term is very close to the zero line almost all the time. So let's find a place where it gets active. It's barely doing anything. No, your D gains are not too high at all. The D-term it's barely doing anything. When the D gain is too high, we see sharp, spiky, high frequency stuff. We don't see any of that here. No, there's nothing. This is, if anything, an undertuned copter. Let's look at your gyros. Oh, that's interesting. What's going on there? You didn't move your sticks. What happened here? Look at that. Did you hit something? That's the yaw gyro only. Oh. Do you have a failing yaw gyro? I don't know. Doesn't say. What's your flight controller? What's your flight controller? Oh. Oh, here we go. F3 Evo. Maybe. If you haven't soft mounted it, I would soft mount it. These twitches on the yaw gyro have me slightly concerned. I don't think those twitches actually... I would need to look at the video, which I'm not going to do because I kind of don't feel like it. These giant twitches here. That means that your copter went zoop, zoop. Let's look at the actual value, how many degrees per second it equates to. 159 degrees per second. That's pretty fast. I don't think that really happened. I think your yaw gyro is having an issue, and that's not good. So try soft mounting your copter if you haven't already soft mounted it. The 9250 gyro on the SB Racing F3 Evo is susceptible to twitches on the gyro. See, your copter's not doing that. You would be complaining about that. If it was 159 degrees per second, zoop to the side, I think you would have mentioned it. We only see it on the yaw axis also. So it's very unusual. A copter will very seldom be destabilized on just one axis and only one axis at a time. So notice that the pitch and the roll lines are completely unaffected, but the yaw goes 159 degrees per second. Zoop! The other two are not touched at all. That doesn't make any sense. I think you have you're getting gyro twitches on your yaw axis, and you need to soft mount. So that's going to help. Yeah, I'm a tricopter hater. Okay, so soft mount your ESCs. Your D gain is not too high. Your copter is, if anything, undertuned. Let's look at your PIDs and see. Are you on 3S? 65 and 55. That's on pitch. Roll is 40 and 35. That's a little lower. Yeah. I think they could come up, but they certainly don't need to come down. We don't see any... Oh, I never did look at your yaw. Let me look at that real quick. I never did look at your actual noise level. Let's look at the noise level of your gyros by zooming all the way out. And you see the lines are very, very thin. So the copter is, if anything, it's over-filtered and doesn't have enough D-gain, if anything. It may be fine if you like how it flies, but it certainly is not under-filtered with too much D-gain. Okay. Yeah, Jacob. I certainly would give it a go. I think and I'm so out of the loop here, but I think the biggest thing holding back the development of tricopters is good tail servos. We used to use, even the best servos we used were not good enough, and it's so important to the flight performance to have that control. And I know that they sell, that RC Explorer has a fancy schmancy servo I've seen on their website, which I assume is a special high resolution, high strength servo designed specifically for the tail. So I would certainly love to give it a try. Part of the problem is that there's a million cool products out there that I'd love to try, but when it comes time to actually plunk down money for them, I go, well, I'd rather buy something else. So so if somebody wants to send me one, I would love to fly it. I'll send it back. I mean, you don't have to give it to me. But if someone has one that they want to send me so I can shoot a video and I can try it, or if you're near my area and you want to come by, we can work out a time to come by and we'll do a video. We'll drink a beer or a soda or whatever, and we'll fly a copter around and have a good time. I'm totally game. But I don't think I'm going to spend the money and time to build one myself, because that's just not where my heart is, LaRock FPV, I have a lot of spikes in Blackbox on my D term, but when I lower it, it doesn't fly well. That's a tough one. If the copter flies well and your motors are coming down cool or only slightly warm, forget it. Just fly. The flight characteristics dictate the tune, not the other way around. How did doctors figure out, when they look at a cardiogram, right? Cardiogram, whatever. When they look at the little line that tells you what your heart is doing, how do they figure out what's good and what's bad? Well, they said, when a cardiogram looks like this, the person dies. And when it looks like this, the person is healthy. So you got to work from the flight characteristics back to the black box. And then once you know what a good flight looks like, then you can work forward from the black box to the flight characteristics. But you always be, especially in a field that changes as fast as ours does, you got to always be recalibrating your expectations. So if your D term looks super noisy, like there was a time when we were focused on hyper filtering the D term and making the D term traces look super smooth. And guess what? The copter flew like crap. The black box logs looked amazing. The copter flew like crap. And we, and by we I mean Boris mostly, figured out that a dirty D term actually provides better flight performance to a point than a really hyper clean one. And so yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, that's what I'd say. Motors are cool. Don't worry about it. If it flies good and the motors are cool, don't stress it. And remember what that D term looks like, so that in the future you can say, this is fine. This is not too much noise. At least for me, this one time. But you just always got to be gathering data in this field and learning about what's good and what's bad and what works and doesn't work. It's such a fast-changing and complicated field. You never have the ability to just rest on your laurels and go, here's what works, and that's the answer. End of story. How often do I do these live feeds? I do these live feeds. I shouldn't say this because it's going to make people submit more because they want live feeds more often. I mostly do the live feeds when my video responses queue backs up too much and I feel bad that people are waiting for me to respond to them. It depends on my schedule, though. If this gets like super backed up and I just don't have time to do live streams, then I'll figure some way to filter it, and I just won't be able to do them all. But so far, I've managed to do every one that's been submitted, and haven't missed it. But I don't do them at a regular schedule because I just never know when I'm going to be free to do it. Let's look at the baby tricopter. I've said this before, but in case you don't know, I have a real soft spot for David Winterstall because he was on flight test back when I was getting into the hobby, so I date myself. And he added, like, the two Joshes are Josh Bixler is a little bit of a square, let's say. I mean that in the most loving and complimentary way. And so of course, then the other Josh is a good foil for him, right? Because he's kind of wacky, right? But then David came in and he was just like, let's crash things. He was just this sort of crazy tricopter guy who came from Sweden and just really added a crazy air to that show. And it was fantastic. And I miss him since he went away, but of course he has his own life to live. But it's really nice to see him out here putting out these great products and staying in business and being successful and staying in the hobby. Because, let's face it, mini quads became ultra popular. And the tricopter could have died, and David could have gone the way of the tricopter. But he was like, no, the tricopter lives. I will make it live again. And he went and he designed TriFlight, and like, here's this sort of island of tricopter goodness. It's like an alternate dimension where mini quads never got popular and the tricopter is king and David is their master. And that's just so entertaining to me. Joseph Pro Gaming, do not pimp your channel on my chat, Joseph Pro. Don't do that. That's not cool. Stop it. That's not what this is about. And especially trading subs, honestly. What software do I use? I use Betaflight. Betaflight 271 and now 2.9. That's what I use. Oh, he didn't. I'm sorry, Leo. Credit where credit's due. You're right. He did. He participated in the testing though, didn't he? Of TriFlight. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. I try to give credit where credit's due, but I don't always have the information. So thank you for clarifying that. It's Lauka who designed the software. But David was involved, wasn't he? I think he was. I could be wrong. All right. Let's do another one. I think we're up to 78. Let me make sure I didn't skip one. 76 was M&K. Yeah, we did that one. Thank you. I'm glad you love my YouTube channel, Adam. It means a lot. 192 grams dry. Oh, I see. It's a small copter. That's pretty light. I'm impressed. Okay. Okay. Can't get the nose from tilting up slightly under throttle. That's completely normal. It should be fixable, but it's normal. The reason for that is that the rear props. Oh, I have a copter here. I don't need to use my hand. The rear props are seeing dirty air from the front props, right? So the front props blow air, and the air is all turbulent and dirt. We call it dirty air. And the rear props are interacting with the dirty air from the front props, which means essentially that the rear props need to spin faster to generate the same amount of thrust. Does that make sense? So you normally see a positive pitch I term, and that's why that is. It's as if your CG was too far back, but it's actually an aerodynamic effect, not a CG effect. And I verified that by moving the CG way far forward and way far back. It had only a very small effect. It's an aerodynamic effect, is my belief. The other thing is that if you hover flat, it doesn't happen, because now the props are equally interacting with the same clean and dirty air. It's only when you're in forward flight that it happens, because now the front props are getting clean air and the back props are getting dirty air. Anyway, fine. What happens when you throttle up and throttle down is the props spin faster or slower, and the aerodynamic situation changes, which means that the copter will pitch slightly as you throttle up and down, and the motors will need to spin faster or slower to deal with that. Generally, the way you fix it is you raise your pitch I gain. That's the gist of it. You also need to make sure your pitch P gain is high enough, because if the P is too low, the I will have to pick up the slack that the P is leaving behind. It's like if the P leaves a bunch of mess on the floor, the I has to clean it up. But if the P does a really good job cleaning the floor, the I term has very little work to do. So if you have to raise your I gain through the roof, then probably your P is too low. And you say, okay, so that leads us into what you say here. The back two are working less hard. So here's a scenario where, because of a combination of CG and aerodynamic situation, whatever, it turns out that the back motors are making more thrust than the front motors, so they have to work less hard. That's fine. Your I term being pinged at 46 all the time is completely normal. The whole job of the I term is to compensate for bias in the thrust output of the motors. So the fact that the I term is pinged at 46 just means that there is a bias in the copter, like a car that pulls to the right. So when you drive the car, you have to pull the wheel to the left, and you're just driving down the road with the wheel cocked to the left. But the car's driving straight, and that's what really matters. Okay, so it's normal to see a positive pitch I term in forward flight, or sometimes negative, but usually positive. The roll in the yaw axis, the I term should be very close to 0 in straight forward flight almost all the time, but who knows? I don't think it should matter whether your motors are wired out of order as long as the mixer is correct. I would say check your P and your I gain to keep the nose from tilting slightly under throttle. Make sure your P gain is as high as you can tolerate without introducing excess oscillations. So don't go crazy, but get it if you've never raised it and you're just like, yeah, it's flying fine. See if it could go higher. Work it up until you get to the point where it's oscillating and you go, okay, that's too much. Then bring it back down again, and now you know. And then make sure, then raise your I gain. Lower your I gain, first of all. Then raise your P gain until you figure out where it needs to be, and then raise your I gain to where the nose holds. That's what I would say. So I didn't even look at your black box, but I feel like I gave you a good answer. I'm going to leave it at that. Let's see. Betaflight better for racing or Baseflight? Oh my goodness. Don't fly Baseflight. Betaflight or Cleanflight is so much better in terms of the way it flies. Okay? Just, I don't even, who flies Baseflight anymore? I heard someone say they were in a country. Where was it? I don't remember the country. They said, look, everybody, it was China. It was a guy in China. He said, you know, there's some hardcore racers here who are really good, but most people just fly Baseflight. I'm like, seriously? Wow. No, Betaflight or Cleanflight for sure. It's so much more featureful, but it also just flies way better, way better. If you're racing, Betaflight or Raceflight is what people are flying if they're racing, and probably KISS 2, although I don't hear about that as much, and I think my gut feeling is it's not as popular for racing as it is for freestyle. Please don't be insulted if I'm wrong. Yeah, Betaflight is essentially, in terms of the PID logic, Betaflight is 6 months ahead of Cleanflight. And Cleanflight always gets the Betaflight features, but because Cleanflight has to sort of cater to a more general purpose audience, they don't integrate those features as aggressively, and they don't update as often. But if you're, the thing is, when you're on the cutting edge, you could say, well, you're on the cutting edge, but there's bugs. It's unstable. Or sometimes Betaflight will introduce a feature, and then it turns out it doesn't fly well, and Boris just says, no, we get rid of that. And if you don't want to experience that, then maybe it's not for you. But most of the stuff that's going on right now in terms of the PID controller is pretty mature, and there aren't many major bugs at all, especially if you use a version that's not like just come out this week. Sometimes a version comes out and like the next day somebody's like, oh shoot, there's a bug, and then it gets fixed. So the Boris's test and development methodology is pretty solid and really does fly better. Then, like, it just keeps getting better, and I'm kind of amazed. I'm like, how could it get any better? And yet it does. Easier to tune, better control, more locked in feel, etc., etc., etc. Do I use B flat on the Lumenier Lux? What is B flat, Samuel Philippi? You don't mean B flat, but that's how I read that. Do I use Blackbox? Do I use Blackbox on the Lumenier Lux? If I did use Blackbox, I would need to use an OpenLog device because it doesn't have a built-in SD, which I prefer to do anyway. But no, I'm not actually currently flying Lumenier Lux at all on any of my copters. The one copter that I had with it, someone else owns it now. I don't remember exactly where it went. Thank you. Time to go fly. Yeah, we're going to finish up pretty soon here. We're almost to the end. Is there some fail-safe in Betaflight? Real fail-safe in Betaflight? You mean like auto landing? No, there's no auto landing. You can't do auto landing without GPS and altitude. And since Betaflight doesn't have that, I mean, it has barometer-based altitude, which is terrible. You really need something like iNav if you want to do proper return to home or anything like that using a Cleanflight board. iNav is a fork of Cleanflight. iNav Cleanflight. Let me find it for you. iNav is a fork of Cleanflight, which is taken the GPS functionality, which Cleanflight has always been terrible with the GPS functionality. It's essentially useless. Although not entirely useless, it's mostly useless. iNav has made it super, super good. And it hasn't, I think, been merged back into Cleanflight yet. But if you have a Cleanflight board and you want to do GPS stuff like waypoints, like return to home, like fail-safe loiter, then get iNav and play with that. Betaflight, if you want it to fail-safe, the safest thing to do is to dump the copter. Just drop it. It can go into auto-level mode and try to land by setting a fixed throttle position. But the problem with that is that, let's say you set the throttle position so you get a nice 1 meter per second descent, right? And then you go from an 1800 to a 1300 battery and you take your Yi camera off. Now your 1 meter per second descent is a climb and your copter's gone. So that's why I say that the auto land function, the failsafe function in Cleanflight and Betaflight, it shouldn't really, I don't think it should be there. But people disagree with me, and I respect their opinion. Personally, I don't think it should be there. And I always configure my copters. If I lose my signal, I want my copter to stop flying now and go into the ground. I have like a half-second window for recovery in the phase 1 failsafe, and then phase 2 is drop, stop flying, because I certainly don't want to chop a puppy's face off, as I like to say. If you have the F303, you have a data flash chip on board. You can set up a black box mode. Take a look at my video on black box configuration, which I linked to earlier in the live stream. I'll link to it one more time. I think it was black box. Oh, there it is right there. How did I get that back? It is this one, how to configure black box on Cleanflight Betaflight. Watch that video, configure it, then use that to send me a log. Yeah. Well, you won't go wrong with any Juan. You won't go wrong with any of the Shendrones frames. I think the camera mount on the Krieger and the Mixuko is kind of chintzy. It doesn't hold the camera very securely, although it does make it easy to adjust the camera. I found that the camera plate angle was always changing in crashes, and it was not consistent. And I thought that for a designer who is as on the ball as Andy Shen, I was surprised that he made the choice he made. It just didn't hold very securely. But the Mixuko is a fine frame, and so is the Krieger. The thing is, what do you got there? You got a camera pod and a base plate. So if the camera pod is kind of chintzy, then then you just have a base plate. At which point anybody can cut a base plate out of carbon. If you're considering the Mixuko and the Krieger, then I personally would point you to the QQ190 from QuadQuestions, which is my favorite Pure X frame right now. And I built a Mixuko too, and I've flown them both. They both fly very, very well, but I think the camera pod on the QQ190 is much better designed. There was a batch of frames that went out recently. You can see them on the RC groups where the carbon was not cut properly. The bit was a little dull and the slots were too small. And QQ190 has offered they offered on the RC groups thread, if you've got one and you feel like it's no good for you, they've offered to replace it. So they're making right, is my point. In general, the quality of these is very high. The design and the cuts are very good. And this is my preference, because again, the base plate is just an X cut out of carbon, right? So don't do anything stupid and you're fine there, which leaves you basically with the camera pod as the place to make sort of the design choices. And I feel like this is a very good camera pod. Okay. 4-inch bullnose better than a normal 4-inch try. I don't know. I don't have enough experience with 180s to answer that question, but I do know that Quadrysteria sent me 4040 bullnose tri-blades, and they fly awesome. And, they may be less efficient because they're a bullnose, but it's a 4-inch prop, so it's not sucking too many amps to begin with, although it did get up into the 50s and the 60s if I really jammed it. So I think on a 4-inch, you need all the thrust you can get, and I would go with a bullnose 4040 like I had there. I don't think you shouldn't be too concerned about efficiency on a 4-inch because you're giving up so much prop area, so you're losing thrust. And so I would definitely go with a bullnose on a 4-inch. But I haven't actually flown a non-bullnose try, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. I'm kind of talking out my ass. Let's this is Adam TFC. Adam, I answered yours. I didn't look at your black box. I just answered it. Now, let's do 1979, and then that is going to be the last one. Significant D-term oscillations. But the pitch and roll D-gains are only at 18. Remember that the D-gain is a function of the noise in the copter. So if your D-gains are low, but you're still getting problems, you may have too much noise. They balance each other out. High noise, you need low D-gain. Low noise, you can have high D-gain. So the noise is a limit on how high the D-gain can go. I'm curious what makes you think you're having D-term oscillations. That's an interesting question, because if your motors are warm, then that says that your D term is not too high. So let's take a look at this right here. I fly with synced. I fly with synced because I am not, as much as I have, I have this YouTube channel which leads people to think that I'm all on the cutting edge, but I'm actually a very conservative builder and pilot. I would almost always rather just be flying something that flies well than be testing out the latest cutting edge feature. And I usually wait for other people to test the cutting edge features and light their puppies on fire and crash their copters into a lake. And then once the kinks are worked out, then I try it out and I do a video about how awesome it is. But you think that because I try these features before you do that I'm on the cutting edge, and I'm really not. So I'm not flying any of my copters right now with unsynced motor output. I am going to do a video soon where I have a test in mind that I'm not going to tell you about until they've released the video, that I hope to answer the question of whether unsynced motor output matters. At least provide some data that points toward an answer. Obviously, it won't be a definitive answer. And after that test, if I find that I feel it makes a difference, then I'll move to it. But for the time being, I'm in no hurry to test it. I'm in no hurry to try it until I'm convinced it makes a difference. And my copters are flying good, and I have no complaints. So I'm flying synced, and you're going to laugh, but I'm flying actually at 2 kilohertz. 2 kilohertz. So even my F303 V3.0, which is running the gyro at 8 kilohertz, my motors are at 2 kilohertz, and I'm using one-shot 125. And all you can go, what? You're not running multi-shot at 8 kilohertz? No, I'm not. No, I'm not. There you go. RC Flyer, I'm glad you could join. That's why I wanted to do it at this time. I won't be able to do it at this time because I only in the evenings. But I'm glad I was able to do it at this time, so some people who normally don't get to join could join. Very happy that you all joined. I really do appreciate everybody who shows up, and my motivation, I've said it before and I'll say it again, my motivation for doing this stuff is that I think this is an amazing hobby that is so fun and exciting. Like, you have dreams that you can fly, right, all your life, and now you put these goggles on your face and it's almost like you can fly. And how cool is it that I can help other people experience that, right? And so it's really enjoyable for me to help you guys learn more about the hobby. It really means a lot that you show up, that you give me the experience of helping you and feeling good about myself that I can help other people have that. We're all sort of doing it together. So thank you guys for showing up and watching the videos, and I'm glad I can help. Yeah. Do we have a sync? Oh, yay, you guys are giving me, I'm going to keep saying it, and you're going to keep doing it, and life is going to be good. You're giving me syncs. Thank you. The sync offset 1301 makes my life so much easier. Thank you so much. 13.01. Let me get my headset on here. I'm just going to watch the video for a second and see what I see. Nighttime flying too. Do you guys see? Hang on. Watch this turn. Watch the copter on the roll axis during this turn, and see if the copter is steady on the roll axis or if it kind of wallows out of the turn and into the turn on the roll axis. Here we go. You see that little bit of, it kind of dipped into the turn a little? When I'm watching a copter, now some of it is the pilot. The pilot could be not coordinating the turn correctly. But whenever I'm watching my copter fly in a turn, a smooth turn, I'm always looking for if it's sort of dipping an arm or wallowing out a little bit. Let's watch again. Left turn, right turn. Yeah, he's doing some slaloms now. You always got to look at the sticks, though, and see if the pilot moves the stick, okay? Because that, of course, will make the copter move. Man, nighttime. Ooh, brave. You're brave, buddy. See how there's just that little bit of instability in the turns? That's a thing I would want to tune out. Let's go back and look carefully to see if these move in his stick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play back at a slow speed, and I'm going to watch the sticks as I watch the copter. Yeah, there, he moved the stick. That's why it moved there. A little bit of bobbling in the nose. Yeah. It looks like it's mostly stick movements, maybe not entirely. And that's something to keep in mind. If you see pilots like Schizo who fly so smooth, and you go, man, that guy must be a great tuner, and he is a great tuner. But if he was to hand you his copter, if Eddie Van Halen handed you his guitar, would you sound like Eddie? No, because it's in the fingers. Smooth pilots fly smooth because they're smooth on the sticks, not just because they're also good tuners. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah. All right, so let's go back here and look at the, go back in here and look at the log. D-term oscillations. Are you having D-term oscillations? Let's start with the roll axis. The roll axis is usually more active than the pitch axis because of the weight distribution of the copter. Okay, so first of all, do you see what's happening here to the D-term? This is not an oscillation. This is high-frequency noise. These sharp jaggies here are high-frequency noise being imposed on the D-term. They're coming from the gyro. The gyro is oscillating, but it's not even oscillating, really. It's just this noise is here. It's too fast to be called an oscillation, and the noise is showing up in the D-term. Now, this is not a problem unless your motors are coming down hot, but this is the exact kind of thing that will make your motors come down hot, because the motor cannot spin up and spin down this fast. So when this signal comes out to the ESC says, motor, do this, and the motor goes, I can't do it, and that wasted energy turns into heat. Imagine if you had a wheel you were trying to spin, and so you're trying to spin the wheel by pushing it with your hand, but the wheel is really heavy. So instead of spinning the wheel, you're just rubbing your hand on the wheel. Your hand's going to get hot. It's going to get ragged and rough, and because you're not spinning the wheel, you're just scraping your hand against it. That's an analogy for what's happening here. The motor trace is saying to the motor, go like this, and the motor's going, I can't do it, and the electrons are sort of scraping against the motor, if you will, and getting hot. So this is not a problem. This is just noise getting into your D-term. As long as you don't end up with hot motors, this is probably fine. But you see how the motors are going, they can't do that. That's why they'll get hot. Now, it's interesting because not every copter has this in the D-term. It may have to do with the filtering or something, but some copters show this noise coming through and others don't. But this is not oscillations. This will get worse if you raise your D gain. But as long as the motors are coming down cool, don't worry about it. So that's fine. Don't worry about that. You could change your filtering, perhaps. So I wouldn't worry about that. I would tune D-term where you feel like it needs to be. As long as the motors are coming down warm but not hot, I wouldn't worry about it. Is that it? Yep. You don't actually have D-term oscillations. You have gyro noise being expressed by the D-term, and that's a thing you can either filter or you could reduce your D gain, but you don't have to as long as your motors are cool. Alrighty. We're gonna finish up here. Let's see if there's any questions I can close up. Lumenier 30 amp ESCs with Beck to the wish list of a store. So here's the deal. Because these are not good ESCs. These were good ESCs a year and a half ago, perhaps. These used to be good ESCs. I don't know why these are still for sale at Get FPV. I don't think these have even, and it could be wrong here, so pardon me if I'm wrong. I acknowledge that I could be wrong. I think this is the same product they've been selling forever, and I kind of don't know how they're still selling it. Here's the deal. This is a $20 ESC. It does, hang on. It does have a dedicated driver. That's not the same one they had. That's pretty good, actually. It does have a dedicated driver. That's good. Okay. So I take back a little bit of what I said. This is not the ESC I meant. The thing is, though, for $20, again, and I only point this ESC out because whenever I go to Quad McFly and say, what's the best ESC I should buy right now, he always hems and haws on the answer. He's like, well, the best ESC depends on what you're doing with it. But this is a good one. This is a very, very good ESC. Top of the line ESC. In his tests, it does amazingly good. And It's 15 bucks. This ESC, how does it perform? How is its braking? How is its thrust? I don't know. Has he tested it? Let's find out. Let's find out. Let's see. What can we do? Let's search for Lumenier. Oh, come on. Lumenier. This is a Lumenier motor. Lumenier motor, Lumenier motor. He hasn't tested any of them, so it's an unknown quantity. Maybe this is a great ESC. It does have a dedicated gate driver. That was the mistake I made on the Power Cube. I won't make that mistake again. So it does have a dedicated gate driver, which means that it probably has decent braking performance, maybe great braking performance. But the thing is, and it does, what's the processor? It's a Scilabs processor. Is it an F390 or an F330? Doesn't say. Does it say somewhere that I'm missing? Do we see in the photo? I don't think we can see in the photo. So if it was an F390 chip and had a dedicated gate driver, it might be a good ESC. But here's the thing. It's $21 freaking. This is a known quantity, tested on the bench, amazingly good ESC, and it's $16. So that's what I would do. And the thing is, don't buy an ESC with a BEC. What year is it? 2014? Well, don't buy an ESC with a BEC. Buy a PDB with a built-in voltage regulator. Why would you buy an ESC with a BEC? Right? You got 3 BECs you're not using. What a waste. Yeah, that's what I would say. Okay. What is the difference when racing with braking on and braking off? Braking, normally, when the ESC tells the motor to slow down, the motor just sort of spins and air resistance slows the motor down. With braking, when the ESC tells the motor to slow down, electrically the motor is literally braked to a stop. And that means the motors can spin up and spin down faster. If you think about how a quadcopter works, anytime a quadcopter needs to do anything, 2 motors spin up and 2 motors spin down, right? You roll, you pitch, whatever you're doing, 2 motors are spinning up and 2 are spinning down. Which means that the overall performance of the copter can only be as fast as the motors that spin down. That's not entirely true, but it's a little bit true. So if you don't have braking, your overall performance is going to be reduced in terms of the copter's ability to stabilize itself, to handle itself in prop wash. For just simple things like flips and rolls, it's not as big a deal. But braking makes a huge difference in the overall handling of the copter. If you're into cars, it's like the difference between a rear diff and a live rear axle. Okay? That's actually, I don't know a lot about cars, but I feel like that's actually a pretty good analogy. But think about the difference in a car between a live rear axle and a rear diff, and that's kind of like what braking brings to the table. The overall handling of the copter is so much better. In fact, I would argue that the braking performance of an ESC is one of the #1 metrics that makes an ESC work well. I would give up some grams of thrust on the top end for an ESC that had excellent braking. Absolutely, no question. Alrighty, guys. That is going to bring it to a close. I'm going to be posting this live stream to the channel. If you missed any of it, it'll be up in the next, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. I always go back and I put an index in with timestamps and everything, so that'll take me some time to do. But thanks for joining me. See you next time. As always, happy flying.